Hey, what's going on YouTube? This is John with Chasing Majors. Appreciate you guys checking out another video. Today I want to share a bit of an opinion piece on what I think Fanatics may be looking to do next, assuming that they do anything next. But I know that there's been many on YouTube and other kind of social media and press sites related to the sports card hobby that are kind of predicting that maybe the grading aspect might be the next position or play that Fanatics looks to do. Obviously, Fanatics is building their own ecosystem. A lot of moving and shaking that they've been doing over the last 18, 24 months roughly. I'm a bit of a contrarian. I actually don't think that the next move is going to be grading. I'll share a perspective there. Above and beyond, I just don't think that it's the proper move for their business and what they're looking to do with the hobby. But before we jump into today's content, I've got a handful of new subscribers that came off the heels of our last video. That video was related to some of the bigger scandals and scams inside the hobby. If you guys haven't taken a look at that, that's been one of our more popular videos to date. I'd encourage you guys to go back and take a look at that after you're done watching this video. By the way, it is Memorial Day. For any of my viewers that are watching in the US, happy Memorial Day. Before I share some of my opinion, there may be some of you that aren't very familiar with what Fanatics has been doing inside the space. So I want to do a recap of sorts. Fanatics, back, I think it was in August of 2021, it was announced that they would be getting the exclusive license for the MLB and MLBPA. They'd essentially stolen that away from Topps, which had had that exclusive license for some time. Shortly after that, we heard that Fanatics had won the rights from the NBA and NFL to also start producing cards. So essentially, Fanatics at this point moving forward, they will be producing all of the cards for the three major sports inside the US sports card hobby. After we found out that the MLB license had been taken away from Topps, it was announced that Fanatics would be acquiring Topps. Estimations came out at about $500 million. And just in the past week or so, we also heard that Fanatics had taken over or acquired PWCC. While there's not been any sort of estimation on what that price is going to be, there's been many inside the hobby who believe that that was basically done for a fairly cheap price. When we talk about Fanatics, other things that they've been talking about or rumored to do an initiative called Fanatics Live. We'll talk a little bit about this here in just a moment. And in the prior days and weeks, we'd also heard that there was going to be some exclusive player contracts, signing athletes. This isn't news in my mind, just from a perspective of sports card companies have been doing exclusive player contracts dating back as far as the 90s. Let's do a little bit deeper dive though than that. For, again, folks that may be new to this, give you kind of an expanded view. What does the acquisition of Topps really mean? In my mind, it means instant branding. Topps, in my opinion, is the most recognizable sports card company or manufacturer in the entire hobby. Doesn't matter if we're talking football, baseball, basketball, golf. Topps is synonymous with sports cards. Not only do they get that brand, but they really do get that presence of what Topps historically has been since the early 50s. Of course, they're going to get manufacturing, whether there's any sort of internal manufacturing that Topps does and or any contracts related to vendors for the production of sports cards, the wrappers, the boxes, the packaging. And then, of course, there's going to be distribution that they're going to benefit from. And then sales, not only wholesale sales related to their distribution channels. Topps over the past, roughly 10 years has really started establishing their Topps.com direct-to-consumer or online retail. And so that's a pretty significant presence that they are acquiring as they're pulling in that Topps brand. I'm a little bit more confused when we take a look at the PWCC acquisition and what that really brings to Fanatics long-standing. But when we think of what PWCC is today, the story, they're a marketplace and an auction house. Now, the marketplace, you could argue that Fanatics.com, the marketplace that they've already created from an apparel perspective, is much more effective and efficient than anything PWCC would be able to bring to the table. However, there will be the auction house component. PWCC also has a vault. Now, for collectors, the vault probably is not significant at all, but for folks that do any sort of flipping or reselling, a vault can be somewhat beneficial for those folks. Don't know if Fanatics will continue to retain that vault. It certainly will be something that Fanatics will be able to take advantage of. For me, I guess maybe the most important thing that PWCC is possibly buying would be things like their customers, the sales data, things like SEO and traffic data, and then just kind of data, universal data across the board, anything that PWCC has been able to initiate over the last 10, 15 years. That's going to be something that, in my mind, Fanatics will be able to take advantage of. Fanatics has already rumored or discussed Fanatics Live. And we've all speculated that Fanatics Live possibly will end up being an internal breaking house, very similar to what we see on Whatnot and those types of programs. But at this point, we could certainly expect that potentially Fanatics Live will have a pretty extensive breaking aspect to it. When we take a look at new product releases, I would assume that Fanatics Live would be the perfect breeding ground for new product releases, where they can show us essentially what's going to be in upcoming products before it actually hits the retail side. And then there would be opportunities to have various types of interactions with various players, influencers, potentially members of the Fanatics business. And so you could see that this Fanatics Live platform would give them marketing. They'll be able to kind of push the Fanatics marketing brand as part of that Fanatics Live experience. Additionally, we've talked about the player contracts. These would be exclusive player contracts. What does that bring? Well, that's going to bring autographs, not only to the sports card industry, but to all sorts of different memorabilia and, exclusive type of activities that they can have those athletes participate in. They could continue to look at things like meet and greets. They could look at social media campaigns, marketing, of course, with those specific exclusive players. I know one thing I had heard was the potential of pulling some sort of a card that when you redeemed that card, a given athlete would potentially follow your social media, which, maybe doesn't have as much intrigue by old dogs like me, but certainly for the kind of that new wave and that younger wave of kids coming into the hobby, that may be something that they really flock towards and really kind of drives Fanatics and the brand moving forward. All right, so let's get to the heart of the video here, and that's really talking about what I think is next. People have been widely speculating that Panini America would be the biggest and brightest target for Fanatics. And I think that there's been potentially opportunities where Fanatics and Panini have been in talks or conversations. Again, all of that's pure speculation at this point, but I don't know that I personally believe that Panini America is the best acquisition that they could go and do. In fact, Panini America, when I think about what that lineup looks like today, yeah, there would be a little bit of lineage with current products that are in the pipeline, things like Flawless or National Treasures, and those products certainly have market appeal kind of universally across the three sports. And so I absolutely understand why they would potentially go after a Panini America, but I really do believe that unless it's pennies on the dollar, the Panini play just doesn't make a ton of sense. Now, I actually look at a company like Upper Deck, and I question if that doesn't have more value. When I think about Upper Deck, the exclusive athletes that they have under that umbrella, simply just going to upperdeck.com, you can go look at their exclusive athletes, and they include the biggest names in the entire sports landscape today. Michael Jordan, LeBron, Tiger, just those three alone are three of the most significant athletes that we've seen over the last 40 years. But then you look at the hockey side, and you have Gretzky and McDavid. On the soccer side, you have Messi. And I think about what Fanatics could do in this space by having the ability to produce Upper Deck cards and start releasing Michael Jordan autographs into the marketplace. Autographs in that space, I think, would be massive for the community and for the sports card hobby as a whole. And so when I start thinking about just the potential manufacturers that are in the landscape, you could throw a company like Leaf into the conversation, even though I think that they're kind of third tier at this point. And yes, they may have some exclusive athletes that could be intriguing, but unless a Fanatics is getting that on pennies on the dollar, I really don't see them making that play. But I really do question that, at least in my mind, Upper Deck may have much more upside and benefit for a Fanatics move than Panini at this point in time. All right, so then as we take a look at other things that have been widely speculated inside the Fanatics ecosystem, everybody's talking about grading and will they make a play on grading? You could argue that it's the biggest hole within their current ecosystem. And of course, some of the bigger named players include SGC, CSG, Beckett. I've also heard some rumors or grumblings that they could do something in-house. Of course, all of that's speculation at this point in time. Of these, a Beckett play would be pretty interesting because not only with Beckett do you get the grading aspect of things, but you also get Beckett Media, and then you could just get the Beckett name, which much like Topps, that Beckett name is something that absolutely has intrinsic value in my opinion. There's a handful of companies that I believe potentially are not in play, and I'll just kind of quickly talk through a couple of these. Collectors Universe, you'll probably know them better as PSA and Golden. They're obviously a fairly large company. Now, they're not the size of Fanatics, but they're a fairly large company. The PSA brand by itself is one of the titans within the sports card hobby today, as we all know. They are the leader in the grading and authentication space. And, if I'm Fanatics, that's really who you'd want to go after if you really did want to own something inside the grading space and you wanted to own the best of the best. But I don't know that we're going to see an acquisition in that space unless, of course, Collectors has an appetite for that to come to fruition, and or unless we start hearing any sort of rumors or news that Collectors is hurting. And then I could see, Fanatics taking a position where there's blood in the water and potentially looking to make some sort of an acquisition down the road. But it wouldn't surprise me to see more of a partnership with a PSA and Fanatics in the future, maybe some exclusive deals. There's all sorts of opportunities that they could do in some of those spaces. Now, they will have a direct competitor in the Golden versus PWC space, so maybe that's not as enticing from a collector's universe perspective, but it'd be interesting to see exactly what happens in this space. But right now, I don't think that grading is going to be in the ecosystem that Fanatics will eventually have. I think that there's just better opportunities and plays to make. Now, COMC is something that some will start talking about. COMC is one of the biggest players inside the online market space today. Leaf, I've already kind of mentioned this. I see Leaf as a third-tier manufacturer. I don't know the intrinsic value is there from a Leaf perspective. Now, could Fanatics look to make a play here? Possibly. I don't know that this is going to be in the space that Fanatics wants to go into. I just don't know that there's enough value there. And unless they're, getting things at pennies on the dollar, I really don't see Leaf as being on target. Then we take a look, or we start thinking about exclusive partnerships, and what could that look like from a Fanatics perspective? Well, of course, we have some of the largest online retail spaces in all of the sports card hobby. You think of companies like Burbank and Blowout and DA Card World, Steel City, and many, many others. These are just a handful of those large online retailers that provide wax as well, provide all sorts of different services. Could we start seeing some partnerships here? Possibly. What does that look like? It's too difficult to really honestly predict what that could look like. Of course, when we think about the Fanatics Live, you think of some of the bigger breakers out there like Backyard. There's a couple of other big breakers. It's not really my space. I really don't spend a lot of time with any sort of breaking, so I don't know all the big players there. Backyard tends to be one of the most talked about within the industry, so there may be others, but could we see partnerships specifically with this Fanatics Live play? And then we start thinking about just some of the other big names within the hobby over the last 15 to 20 years. And then there has been rumors related to Sports Card Investor. Of course, Sports Card Investor does have the Market Movers tool. May that be something that a company like Fanatics wants to look into? Possibly. Who knows? The sports pricing space has always been an interesting space, as Beckett kind of used to dominate that 20, 30 years ago. Because I know on our website, chasingmajors.com, we have our own little price guide. It's a free tool for any and all to use. It essentially is just taking pricing history over the last 90 days and will provide you a different view on how to look at priced cards versus what you'd get from some of the other free online tools that are out there. Of course, Market Movers, it's going to give you pricing history and various charts. They're trying to take more of that investor route. You would also potentially have a Jeff Wilson, the character that Jeff Wilson has become. He certainly is going to put eyeballs onto a brand with some sort of partnership and or acquisition. All right, so here are some of my thoughts. What do I think about Fanatics? Well, I actually think Fanatics is very good for the hobby. I think that they're very forward-thinking. I think that their approach can be fairly aggressive. I guess, the perfect example I would cite there is going after the MLB license. As they went after that, they essentially were going after a titan within the industry that had been very established with the Major League Baseball PA and Major League Baseball itself. And to see them win the exclusive licensing, to me, that's a very aggressive and bold move that we've seen 18, 24 months ago. I also think that Fanatics is very progressive in how they want to move the hobby forward. But I do think that they'll look to try and continue to influence the youth to participate in the hobby. Now, as I mentioned, I do think that Fanatics should stay away from the grading side. But I've always questioned just one simple thing, and that's every manufacturer who produces sports cards, if they just had improved quality assurance before the cards make it out the door, i.e. every card coming out of a pack having a 10 quality, then really you'd start arguing that the shelf life of some of these sports grading companies, there would be a very short shelf life there. Now, they wouldn't disappear altogether. Certainly the marketplace of everything that was produced before Fanatics walked through the door, all of that's still going to have a shelf life up to a certain point in time, though I do think that if quality was improved for all cards moving forward, and we did truly expect and receive 10 quality out of every single pack, that we would see potentially only one grader in the next 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years. I think that that's something that certainly could be impacted by just improved Q&A coming from the actual production side. Fanatics and Topps will be able to produce. You could look at that. Obviously, you could argue there's going to be a need from an authentication perspective from now until the end of time. It's always been, in my opinion, one of the biggest aspects of value that these grading companies provide. Unfortunately, it probably gets talked about the least, and the aspect of the grade gets talked about the most. Now, and that's why I believe you're not going to see these companies go, but unless Fanatics believes that this would be a huge revenue stream, I just question that they're going to go down this space. I don't see this as a huge need with the ecosystem that they're creating, and I think that they have bigger fish to fry, and targeting a company like Upper Deck, in my opinion, potentially would be a much smarter move. So if I were Fanatics, I believe that I would focus more on in-house manufacturing or solidifying the contracts with the third-party printers and packaging companies to ensure that they are providing 10 quality in every single card in every single pack. Unfortunately for the grading companies, that would make them less and less relevant for all modern day cards. But if Fanatics went down that road and really focused on improving in-house manufacturing and really expecting the type of product that they are releasing to you and I, the end consumer, I think that that is absolutely the play that I would like to see them focus on. And quite honestly, every single one of us should be expecting Fanatics to take this approach. They shouldn't be selling us subpar cards. We've become accustomed to it because we've not had a company take the pride to go and provide us the type of quality we should expect, but we should expect 10 quality for every card we pull out of a pack. And I would really like to see them, focus more on this aspect. I just don't know that long term that ROI or that return on investment in the revenue stream, that it's as beneficial as it has been over the last 10 years and over past 20 to 30 years. So if I was Fanatics, I would make a huge play towards Upper Deck. I would make that play over Panini. Again, there is some lineage with Panini. They do make some fine high-end products, which would be very, very relevant within a modern-day sports card space. But Upper Deck, I think that there's more advantage there. Not only do you get the exclusive contracts, and of course, you'd want to understand the expiration of those long-term contracts. But you want to make a splash inside the hobby, you start making Upper Deck Michael Jordan autographed cards with him wearing Chicago Bulls jerseys again. You'll make a splash in the overall industry. You start pairing that with LeBron James or Tiger Woods or the handful of other exclusive contracts that Upper Deck has, and we start seeing that type of product re-released. That would be the biggest splash that Fanatics honestly could make above and beyond what they've already done, and that's acquiring Topps. It would also give them the rights to the hockey license. Not sure that that's necessarily a huge play for them, but then they would essentially have dominance across the 4 biggest products inside the US. And then one thing that came to my mind when I was throwing this together was at some point Upper Deck took over Fleer. Now, I don't know what that contract looks like in today's marketplace, but if Upper Deck truly does own the branding rights for Fleer, then acquiring an Upper Deck would allow Fanatics to not only create Topps cards, things like Topps Chrome and all of the good stuff that we've loved over that Topps brand over the last 15, 20, 30 years. Acquiring Upper Deck, now you have that entire Upper Deck umbrella, being able to kind of capitalize on that brand itself. And then if they still do have the rights to the Fleer product, I just think that there's a ton of value that we could see with modern day branded Fleer and Upper Deck cards with officially licensed products moving forward. So if it was me, this is the play that I would be looking at if I was Fanatics. And certainly, I think it's something that's not being talked about very broadly inside the hobby today. All right, so as always, I'd like to hear you guys' comments. Please feel free to leave those below. If you'd like to reach out to me directly, head over to chasingmajors.com. That is our website. Feel free to hit subscribe if you like this type of content. If you haven't already subscribed and you want to watch future content, I'd certainly appreciate that. Go ahead and hit that like button if you're still here, and we'll chat with you guys in the next one.